everyone. Thank you so much for joining us to this second webinar from our Sustainability Case of Writing Awards from Ivey Publishing and Prime. We are so happy that you're all here. We're very excited for this second webinar because we're going to learn so much today. And I hope that a lot of people from the first webinar are here and a lot of new people as well that are interested in advancing sustainability in business education. So welcome, and we're so happy that you're here. So this webinar, we've titled it Crafting Sustainability Cases, Tips for Winning Submissions. And that is precisely what we're going to do here. We're going to help you build stronger submissions to the case awards. And to do that, we have three amazing experts that will share their knowledge in their particular areas of this field so that you can get a 360 vision of what really will help you succeed in the awards. But not just that, but also what will help you succeed in the future as you continue building on your work towards sustainability in business education. First, I want to say, before introducing them individually, that in case you haven't seen the details from the awards, you can find them all on the Ivey Publishing website, but I want to just give you a refresher. The Ivey Publishing Sustainability Case Writing Awards is a collaboration with Prime's Principles for Responsible Management Education. That is just the way that we found to encourage the development of high quality, innovative, impactful learning materials on sustainability. And we want to do this because we believe that creating more materials that are aligned with the Sustainable Development Goals is worth it and is what's going to build a better future in business education, and as well, I would say, educate better leaders of tomorrow. So in this practical session, we're going to have Meredith Story, who is the Senior Manager of Programs and Engagement at Prime, an initiative of the United Nations Global Impact. Meredith, lovely person. She has over 10 years of experience across the UN in different positions, but also in higher education systems. She holds a Master of Science and a PhD in Business Education for Sustainable Development. So not only she's an expert in all things UN, but she has particular experience in this field. Also, we have Yuri Golandris, a great colleague from the Ivey Business School. He's an associate professor of sustainability and operation management, and he's an amazing thing. He's the director of both the Ivey Building Sustainable Value Research Center and the NBS. Our good friends from the NBS. Don't know how he does it at the same time, but he's the director of both and he does a great job. His research focuses on sustainable supply chain design, governance structures, and the transition to regenerative agri-food systems. He has published cases with us, but also in top journals and leadership publications, and he brings a wealth of experience and passion to this webinar. And last but not least, we have my colleague, Violetta Gallagher. Violetta is the Associate Director of Product and Publishing here at Ivey Publishing. He currently leads the high-performing team that brings you the learning materials that Ivey is known for. And she's always on the hunt for a new project, a new adventure, getting to know our authors across the globe, and focused on building our operations and improving the way that we help you publish your cases. So thank you so much for the three of you for joining us, and I'm sure this is going to be a great session. Let's start with Meredith. Meredith, floor is yours.
Thank you very much. It's been so nice to be able to join you all today. There's been a year of work that went into this from the other side. So to be able to meet with the community right now and to see that it's already so well attended, I was just going through the participants list, and there are many names that are already a part of the Prime community. So it's wonderful to kind of have that experience and share the floor, but also that this can be such a wonderful entry point for individuals that are looking to engage too. So we're so grateful to Ivey and to everybody who's joining us here today. So Because I only have 10 minutes and I want to cover as much ground as possible, I am just going to speak with you here rather than sharing slides. So I hope I have everybody's listening ears. The idea behind this was a wonderful synergy between the chairperson, Tima Bansal, who is of our advisory board, and the Prime United Nations Global Compact outreach mechanism. So what we've been doing for the last 3 years is we've been working on building the Prime pedagogy operation, which is based on the Impactful Five project. Now, we were very lucky under the leadership of Meta Morrising through 2020, 2021 to receive a $6 million Lego grant from the Lego Foundation, like the bricks. And they are not just leaders and pioneers in children's toys and in playful operations, but also in pedagogical development in youth, in K-12, but then they've given us a very special mandate for how we can extend this into the higher education system to test how people learn critical issues. And what's more critical than the UN narrative and the Sustainable Development Goals? So, what we had found constantly throughout the last decade of Prime is that we'll be a wonderful bridge and facilitator with groups like Ivey, with groups like MBS, with groups that are also existing in this mandate as a bridge. But the Prime community is a community of educators, of researchers, of students, of deans and leaders, and they have a greater need. And what this need is really showing is a need for classroom resources, as a need for shared language and experience that they can tag with their students, that they can tag with the needs of industry and the skills gap, and that they can tie with the wider community to make their research, their teaching all more relevant to the classroom and beyond. So in the Prime I5 Impactful 5 project, what we have been working to do is take interventions that are meaningful, joyful, actively engaging, socially inclusive, and iterative, and be able to plug those into the classroom. So it's a framework, you could say, because I've just listed 5 little frames that you can fit yourself into, but it's not meant to be a framework in the same way as traditional education theory might suggest that you have to do XYZ or ABC. It's inclusive. It's saying, come along with Prime. You have permission to play. You have permission to test out what climate change curriculum might look like in your classroom. You have permission to test how poverty can be taught in a case study or in real world examples. Taking away the fear and kind of putting the UN stamp and the Prime stamp on, if you fail, it's all right, but this is about coming on a journey together, testing what your skills as an educator and a researcher are about, testing what your skills as a case teacher and a case writer are about. So we've been very, very excited by the process that we're presenting with you today, because this is a formalized demonstration of beginning to build those resources with wonderful partners who are already the best at building wonderful resources. So taking the mandate of Prime around the Sustainable Development Goals, responsible management education, developing community resources and input moments, and taking it to the classroom, taking it from your expertise to the expertise of a greater community. So I'm just so thrilled and excited. I could talk all day about the UN Global Compact if you'd like me to. We're just at a very busy time as we approach 2030 and the remaining years of the Forward Faster agenda that we have here. And I'm sure I can touch on all of that later. But just to note that the pedagogical side of things is something that Prime has acknowledged as a pathway forward for change. And one of the major agents that we see here is case teaching, case writing, and all of you that occupy this space.
Thank you, Meredith. I have a quick question for you. So, specifically from Prime's perspective, what advice would you give to people that want to participate in the case award? Um, in regards to the framework, what is the
Yeah.
first thing you think they should do?
I think taking the risk and challenging yourself to be creative is the most important thing. Where business as usual isn't working, maybe cases as usual. Push yourself further. Consider what creativity options you can bring in. Bring joy to the classroom. Teaching climate change can be so daunting and so heavy for your class. Teaching other issues of sustainable development are just as challenging. And while business educators are oftentimes the peak expert in their field and in their classroom, we're not expecting everyone to be experts in the sustainable development goals or in responsible management as a whole, but we know that that is a frontier that needs to be explored. So to say, take the risk to be engaging, be exciting, and explore things that maybe you're not first of all comfortable with, but that you have You have our blessing, you have our support. Let's go forward together.
Wonderful. Well, Meredith is not going away. She's going to stay right here, and you can ask her anything that you want, specifically about Prime, about the I-5 framework, right in the Q&A session. In the Q&A section, if you can see on the bottom of your screen, and we will answer those questions right after our panelists finish their presentations. And if you don't get an answer from any of them, we will also follow up with you with an email after this. So ask away. We are happy to engage with you and to answer all your questions. And speaking of questions, thank you, Meredith. Now we're moving on to Yuri Golandris, and we're gonna have a conversation about what he does. One of the great things he does best, which is write cases focused on sustainability. Thank you so much, Yuri. How are you feeling this morning?
I'm doing very well, thank you. It's a little bit ugly outside and super warm considering it's November, but we're here talking about sustainability, so let's get into it.
Yes, absolutely. Well, let's get right on it. Can you please talk to me and us about what makes a sustainability case different from a traditional business case study, and what key elements should always be included for a case to be labeled as a sustainability case?
Let me start with a premise. Everything I'm going to share is arbitrary and just subjective to my approach, and I don't own the knowledge, and so please take it with that premise. Everything I'm going to share.
Good
Uh,
point.
I see the case writing process as a very personal endeavor, and I know that several of my colleagues here and in other schools approach it in the same way. Uh, to me, I think Meredith said something that I completely agree with, which is about sustainability cases tend to illuminate opportunities that we would not be able to see otherwise. We often get trapped into the impossibility of changing a very complex system that we have developed over hundreds of years that constrain our decisions, our organizational forms, our operational systems, and make it more costly for those nested in those systems to pursue pathways that generate high positive externalities in a purposeful way. Because businesses and organizations would like to contribute positively to nature and society, but that pathway is usually not the pathway of least let's say,
Resistance.
inconvenience. Yeah,
Yes. Yeah.
exactly. So I think a sustainability case study should help us, the reader of the case, as well as those that write the case, to break free from our contemporary paradigm, to illuminate new possibilities, new ways of knowing, new ways of acting, new ways of regulating, new ways of financing. Uh, Usually, traditional case studies are just implicitly concerned with providing a context for the instructor and the students to apply tools that already exist. I think that applies to sustainability case studies as well. In several of my cases, I do operational analysis, break-even analysis, LCA analysis. But what the nuances that these analyses allow you to see in that context challenge your current assumptions of impossibilities of change. So one is the case need to help you to break free from contemporary assumptions. It should illuminate cases where leaders and organizations have decided to pursue societal well-being, ecological resilience, and the interdependencies between them, which are often misunderstood. To tackle the ecological crisis, we need to tackle the social crisis first, and showing the interdependencies through a story that highlights how certain social dimensions, economic dimensions, and ecological dimensions are connected in a given context. It provides us with a better grounded understanding of those complexities. Uh, finally, I'm reading through my notes. One of the best cases that I happen to use in my class are those that challenge my own assumptions as a writer or as a teacher. I've been using a case that is actually not published by Ivey, but was developed by a colleague of mine, which is Polyface, the farm of many faces, is a case that was published in 2011, and it compares the traditional industrial approach to food production with agroecological approach to food production, and shows that the agroecological approach is actually economically viable. It just relies on a different ways of organizing that leverages economies of scope rather than economies of scale. So when I read that case, I approached the case with the assumption from an operational perspective that it's not possible in the current economic system to pursue agroecology. And that case, through calculation, shows that that's actually not true. There is someone that was able to pull it off. And the case allows us to go deep into understanding how that has been achieved and what decisions have been made to achieve that outcome. So in a nutshell, a sustainability case should challenge our own paradigms and should illuminate opportunities and possibilities that until this point in time, we have assumed not to be possible.
That is a great point. Sustainability is not grabbing one single aspect of it and solving it, because they're all connected, and it's all about challenging those established thoughts that we all have. Now, what about navigating change in the future? You know that the business landscape changes so much. How do you ensure that the cases that you write, that the projects that you decide to work on are going to contribute to long-term sustainability thinking and are going to generate an impact and will remain relevant over time?
I actually would like to challenge that assumption that the business world keeps changing all the time. It doesn't really. Our paradigms have been the same for over 70 years. We believe in profit maximization, wealth accumulation, um, in efficiency uh, seeking behavior, and scaling and specialization as main mechanisms of efficiency um, maximization. Or Ricardo's competitive advantage is one of the main models that is so pervasive that everything we do, even how we teach businesses to, or new ventures to approach their growth, is based on that understanding that we should specialize, gain efficiency, scale wide as fast as possible. And that has been the same for decades. I believe that similar to the case of Polyphase that I mentioned before, it was published in 2011. My colleagues started to write it in 2007. And only now we are talking about regenerative agriculture and is becoming a buzzword. And that was developed 20 years ago. So I believe that if we are looking for cases that challenge our own assumptions and what we believe is currently possible, those cases will remain relevant for decades to come. At least the conceptual insights from those cases will. The specifics might evolve of the contextual elements, but the, the the deeper insights will remain valid and valuable over time.
That's a good perspective. Thank you, Yuri. And now looking at the negative aspects of, or the difficult aspects of case writing, what common pitfalls or I would say common mistakes do you think authors should avoid when crafting sustainability focused cases? Apart from seeing things in a particular way and breaking those barriers, what else would you suggest when planning to write a case, and specifically when planning to submit a case in a competition like this, and you really want your case to stand out from the others?
A few things that maybe reflecting on my own mistakes over time, and see that and things that I see when I work with a younger colleague or someone that is new to case writing, is that the first is that the case is just descriptive. you shouldn't bake in theory, you shouldn't bake in your ideas. The case in itself is just a factual description of what has been happening in a given context around a given organization for a given decision at a specific point in time. And it's very descriptive. And in that way, the creativity of looking at the theoretical lens, unpacking the decisions that have been made and how they've been approached happens in the teaching note. So my suggestion would be that the case is a pure, as much as possible, factual description of who was involved, for what decisions, with what goals, in what context, socio-ecological as well as economic context. And the magic happens in the teaching note. So my suggestion is to keep the two separate. The second one is that and is related, is that I see many individuals writing a case to make the assumption that the company in the case has made the right decision, or we are writing this case because we want to illuminate something that the company has done well. I think we need to be a little bit more neutral, not disconnected from the case, but just neutral, open to the possibility that we can analyze that context with some objectivity, considering multiple perspectives of different right holders and stakeholders that were involved, and looking at how the decision and what has been done in the case, how it is producing benefits and costs for the different parties involved in an objective way, rather than writing the case implying that the organization was working in the right direction. That's actually the conclusion of the discussion, not not how the case should be written. The other one is another suggestion that I have is to go deep. I usually don't think about what I want to teach with that case until after I have developed a certain level of understanding about the case. So that is a little bit difficult, because how can you decide whether or not to write a case if you don't know exactly what you want to say with that case? So there is a little bit of that tension to manage. You need to be current in terms of your understanding of the literature and conversations that are happening in practice and policy, to be able to know at a high level, like using your instincts, that that case is illuminating something that is fairly novel on the edges, like a new way of financing, a new way of scaling. Maybe instead of scaling wide geographically, the company is scaling deep within a specific community, and that's not discussed too much in the literature, and is not a traditional way of scaling in entrepreneurship studies. It's an operational system that, instead of leveraging economies of scale or economies of learning, leverages economies of scope and integrate with natural cycles. So you have to have an intuition of why you think the case is cool. It illuminates something novel. But before to really go deeper into what you really want to teach with that case, you need to get into the case and understand the history of it, like what things happened over time that led to this opportunity or this decision, and then understand the operational context around the case and the economic context around the case. And once you have that contextual understanding, then you can zoom in on that specific decision that is more controversial or is more innovative, original, relative to the assumptions that we tend to make. And only after I decide what tools I use to unpack the decision. And therefore, in that sense, you need to build a good relationship with whoever the company is, because chances are that you need to go back to them often. And developing a case to me usually takes between 6 months to a year, which seems a long time. Obviously, I do many other things in parallel, but I let it rest in my mind. I'm learning the last 6 months. I've started to learn drums, which is crazy. My wife and kids, my kids are happy. My wife not so much. But what I rediscovered in that process is that I can spend an hour trying to do a beat, and I cannot do it properly. Then I go to bed. My brain start working as I sleep, and the day after I can actually do it. So the same thing with cases. I acquire the contextual knowledge, but then I let it rest and grow in my mind. And at some point, maybe I read a paper, I read a newspaper article, and suddenly that case challenges some of the assumptions that are baked into that newspaper article or that paper that I'm reading, and so I can push it to the next level in terms of what the case is challenging or allows to discuss.
Great. Thank you so much. I have an additional question. When you mentioned in the prior point that you have to go in not necessarily assuming that the approach that the company took is the right one, but at the same time, you want to challenge that a little bit, descriptively, of course, and at the same time, you want to establish a good relationship with this company because you need them to sign a release form for you to be able to move forward with the case. It will be kind of tricky there. What would you suggest for
Yeah.
authors to establish a good relationship with companies when they approach them? What has worked
Uh,
for you?
so okay. So this can be difficult. So I just gonna use my experience as an explanation, and I will start with a provocative question: how many cases of failure do we have in our library? Very, very few, because no one likes to talk about failures. So what? Yet I published one a few years ago. I cannot say which one, but I'll say that how this case came about was actually the director in that organization had a relationship with one of our PhD students and was very excited about this new solution that they were um, pushing forward to improve the sustainability of their supply chain. And when the student was also excited about this opportunity, told me I had several concerns of why that solution might not have worked in the way the organization was expecting to. So, but I played along. I worked with them to describe what they wanted to do, why they wanted to do it, and what they were expecting to achieve. We wrote the case with those informations, and then suddenly 2 years after, the initiative failed and they didn't want to write the case about it. So in that specific instance, what I did was to write the case based on public sources. There were already plenty of information about what they were trying to do on the web, and so I didn't need their approval to publish. I just described the case and the process based on publicly available information, and that was enough for me to have a great discussion in the classroom relative to what was the purpose and the expectations of the organization, and what could have been some unintended consequences they were blind about. And so that's one approach, and I necessarily don't suggest that to be the one you pursue. It just evolved in that way. It wasn't how it was supposed to develop. And for companies, oftentimes those that are really trying to shake the system, to create a new system that we can appreciate and love, and migrate from the current system that is degenerative and move to that system. Those that are truly passionate about building that, they approach this case writing process as a way for them to learn about what they're doing, to have a safe room where they can reflect upon the horse that they are jumping on. Because usually organizations and entrepreneurs and leaders, they jump on a horse instinctively. They think is a good horse to jump on, and working with us on writing cases is an opportunity for them to stop and engage with someone on the other end that has no skin in the game and can ask provocative questions and challenge the underlying assumptions. And so the way I've been building relationship with companies is, okay, you're trying to do X and you are trying to achieve X through Y and Z decisions and actions. Let's have a conversation about why, what are your assumptions, what you're expecting to achieve, with what timelines, based on what processes, and just describe it factually. And then it doesn't matter if it will happen that way or not. The conversation that you want to have in the classroom is that was what they were trying to achieve, but it was a complex situation. How do we unpack it? How do we approach the decision? And then we can eventually compare what the students say with what was the ultimate, what happened at the company level. So my suggestion is to sell the case to companies as an opportunity to reflect upon what they are doing and going deeper to explore their assumptions regarding goals, processes, strategies, decision-making principles.
Thank you. Wonderful. Very, very helpful. Well, thank you so much, Yuri. I know that we have more content, and I know that you have questions, all of you, but just as Meredith, Yuri is not going anywhere. We're going to have a Q&A session with everybody at the end, so keep sending your questions. I see we have 15 questions at the moment. So, Yuri, thank you so much, and I appreciate you sharing your knowledge. And now I would like to give the floor to my colleague, Violetta Gallagher. Violetta is the person that will tell you every technical detail that you need to succeed in this case awards. So, hi, Violetta. How's it going?
Hello, Laura. Thank you. And it's so nice to see so many familiar authors on this call. Like Meredith, I'm sharing that engagement and excitement. So we're going to hop right into really why are we here, right? So some of this might be repetitive, and I gained so much knowledge, and it was great to hear from Yuri on assumptions. I know I saw some questions in regards to specific criteria, so we'll cover that a little bit, and hopefully we've answered a lot of those questions. So we, as Ivey Publishing, are a leading global case publisher. And as we know, because we're sitting on this call, we've partnered with UN Global Compact's Principles Responsible Management Education, as we've been defining and calling PRIME. We want to launch, and we've launched successfully our very first sustainable case-focused case competition. So this initiative really encouraged us to focus on case writing on sustainable development to inspire responsible decision-making and management education. It's a shared commitment advancing the UN Sustainable Development Goals, so SDGs. And a shameless plug, we have many cases in our library that have been tagged for SDGs from 1 to 17. And those are conversations, using those cases are a conversation that you cannot avoid that SDG aspect in being primarily in the decision point. So Ivey Publishing and Prime, we aim to attract high quality submissions, and we'll speak to the submission criteria in a moment, and amplifying the reach of winning cases that will highlight diverse perspectives on sustainability worldwide. This marks, which is really exciting, Prime's first formal recognition of sustainably focused case contributions, which aligns to, as Meredith has already mentioned, to transform management education globally. So it's an exciting time for all of us. I speak to this many times, but what makes a great case? And there's 6 elements here. One is the decision point, so that it's clear and it outlines who, what, when, where, and how. And as Yuri had mentioned, it's a description. So the case is a description of an event. And so this opening paragraph that you will write and this hook and this trigger that you will include is fundamental in telling the story. It needs to be relevant. So in our case, sustainability and speaking to the I5 Prime framework. And so you want to learn about a real business that students can relate to. At the same time, it needs to be relevant in the sense that who is the protagonist? Not every student is going to become the CEO of Amazon. So being able to write about a manager, a director facing sustainable challenges. This is very important for within the classroom and classroom discussions. We want it to be versatile. so it can be used over multi-dimensional topics and or issues. So here we can speak to sustainability and operations. Yuri has many cases in that regard, or sustainability and strategy, or sustainability and finance. Two, we need to make sure that the objectives and the teaching and learning objectives are met. This is important. This is the parallel writing of your case and your teaching note, and that is that excitement on where you can add that opportunity to include the I-5 framework. And that we want the data to be clear. So we want exhibits to be clear. We want what is presented to be clear, but not just that. If there's large data sets to play with, please include those. And then, of course, it needs to be engaging. It has to be an engaging story with compelling issues. No student wants to go through a classroom from 75 to 90 minutes knowing that it is about 1990. So I'm going to jump into the submission criteria. And there are 3 items required in the submission criteria, which is the case study, the teaching note, and some more of logistics. So the case study. Cases must be geared towards pedagogies of business and management schools, which can be used to foster engaging learning experience. We will welcome multidisciplinary case submission that advance sustainable development. Cases must be field-based and will require consent to use to be signed or supported by published sources. We use CMOS, so Chicago Manual of Style 17, for sourcing. There's many resources on our website available on how to properly source. Case studies must not exceed 8 pages of body text and no more than 15 pages in total. So this is including your exhibits. Also, if there's any including supplemental documentation or are there appendices, please include those in your submission. You may have created a PowerPoint for your students to use within the classroom, or maybe to inform instructors on how to use the case. Please include those within your submission. We are also welcoming non-traditional case studies, so including video cases, simulations, or any other novel pedagogical materials. Be creative. This is that opportunity. We want to see what you can come up with to speak to sustainable cases. And then last but not least, any financial exhibits should include usable and editable .xl or XLS files. So please make sure you're including the right content and documentation. To jump into the teaching note, because as Yuri had mentioned, the case is going to be descriptive. This is where we include the impactful 5 principles. So a teaching note that includes the following: an introduction to the program on which the case is used and to the background of the students who will use the case. So pedagogical objectives and underpinnings of the case, possible questions for class discussion, and any other comments that might be of assistance. Quality submissions will make explicit reference to good pedagogy and the processes underpinning the educator and classroom experience. The sustainability issue is pertinent to the case study. And the learning outcomes. We need to include the learning outcomes here. A description of the impactful 5 principles that apply to the case. Not all these principles are expected to apply to all of the case studies. So the prime impactful 5 I-5 framework, some of the questions were around, how do we possibly include this? I've come up with a few examples. So emphasis in integrating cognitive, emotional, creative, social, and physical skills into business education through playful learning. So in a business case study, these principles could be applied by designing activities that foster meaningful engagement, so real-world problem solving, encourage collaboration, team-based analysis, promote irritation through refining strategies. So incorporating joy and well-being, such as celebrating milestones or successes, this all ensures holistic learning that prepares students to tackle sustainability challenges. And to detail our submission form and what's required. We require our author and organization details at the time of submission. All required documentation, so our case, your teaching note, any supplemental materials. Also included in that teaching note, again, is the I-5 impactful I-5 principles and how are they going to be used. An acknowledgement from the author's dean in support of the case study and submission, and an acknowledgement of whether the organization is a prime signatory. If not, we will send information and encourage you to become a part of the prime signatory. And other criteria include copyright, so the work must not be published elsewhere and is your own original work. And the submissions are limited to English at this time. And I'm also going to share, and many of you have already probably seen this, but in regards to our awards. So we're going to recognizing excellence in sustainability case writing. The first place is 2,500 Canadian, second place is 1,250 Canadian, and third place is 750 Canadian. Really quickly, I'll throw up the resources, but when we send an email, we will also send resources and links to all these resources to help and guide you in case writing through our submission guidelines, also including the sustainability awards criteria. There's great teaching note layouts that are copy and paste and easy to print, a consent to use and citation guidelines, as I had mentioned. So we're really excited to see all your submissions and look forward to it.
Thank you,
Over to you.
Violetta. That was wonderful. Lots of great information. And now I think we're ready to start a Q&A sessions. We have a lot of questions. Some of those have been answered, but I'm sure that we can answer others. I think this one is for Meredith. Somebody is asking, how can we embed the I-5 in cases specifically? And I know you have a lot of resources that you can share, but go ahead.
Yep, perfect. So we've been doing this for 2.5 years at this point. So there are examples that work and examples that don't work, but I'd say read through the I-5 playbook and the I-5 viewbook to see what makes sense for your context. Because if I stood up here and said, this is the best way to get meaning into your classroom, it's going to vary wildly from case to case, from context to context. So I'd say it's about sense making for yourself, but we have 2 resources that I've shared with the organizers that we'll share in turn, but it's about the I-5 playbook, which is a PDF that you can read through good examples of what each of these characteristics look like. If you're curious to thinking about what they look like in action, there's also signature moves associated with these characteristics. But I wouldn't, kind of as Jury said, that you don't need to lean on a specific way of sharing a certain theory or pinning yourself. It's about opening the discussion and opening to a more neutralized context there, where we want to see meaning and joy in these things embedded in the process of what it takes to engage with the case, engage with the teaching note, that's empowering and enabling, rather than saying that it's XYZ way that it needs to be done. So Laura, I hope
Yeah.
that answers.
Yeah, it does. That makes sense. And we are going to share the playbook, the link to those resources in our follow-up email when we share the recording of this webinar. So worry not, we will share the resources. Thank you so much, Meredith. Well, we have a question here that can be answered by Violetta or Yuri. It's about, we touched a little bit on this. It's about writing cases on companies in small cities or small companies. Somebody's asking if they can concentrate their cases on startups and all the small companies. And of course,
Violetta, please go ahead.
Okay. Absolutely. We enjoy receiving cases on small companies, small businesses. That is it's part of the relevancy within your case and classroom discussion. So this is where, students can learn about Amazon and they can learn about Tesla and many others, but local content matters. And so having that ability to have local content with the aspect of the I-5 principles would be, I can only imagine, would be an interesting conversation and discussion.
great.
I think those are the best cases. In fact, in itself, this question has an implicit paradigmatic assumption, which is large matters more than small, which is not necessarily true. And if we need to build alternative systems, those systems will grow from the ground up. So at first will be small. And we can then maybe think about replication and scaling in the right proportions and with the right rhythms. So I think 3 of my recent cases, one is out and 2 of them will be out soon, are about small businesses. And one was a 2-person venture that was trying to create a circular business model, a reusing business model in southern Ontario, and they had a couple $100,000 to do it. So how you pull that off, that's basically what the case is about.
I can see here a related question, and somebody's asking, can we write sustainability cases centered on municipal government, or must it be a company?
Okay, municipal government. That is always tricky. Yes, you can. We have a few cases in the collection that are based on municipal governments. However, where it becomes a little bit tricky is the information and that description that you're going to include in the case. And so some of it might be because of sign off, and other reasons it might be because of the limited public resources available to tell the story. So you have to make sure that you are including all the information in the case so that the students can do the analysis and have a great classroom discussion. So that, but yes, it will be tricky.
My suggestion is yes, please do it, because and I know that even when I talk to my deanship or the president of the university, we don't necessarily agree on that point. We agree to disagree. Like, I'm in a business school, but I come from a management school and an engineering school, and I do like more to talk about management rather than business. Business is one specific form of organizing, and often business don't feel market voids where the positive externalities are substantial, because it's very difficult for business to create economic rent out of providing a good social service. So in those areas, who steps in are municipalities, local governments, NGOs, cooperatives. So all those forms of organizing that create conditions for us to be more sustainable must be studied, understood, and then there could be some lessons learned that can then be applied even by businesses or by others that want to replicate or adjust that organizational form to fit their context. But to me, to go back to what is the goal we are trying to achieve here? We are trying to illuminate possibilities that already exist and can inspire new ways of doing and thinking. So please do, as long as you are able then to unpack a sufficient level of detail that enables an in-depth conversation in the classroom. And the same way businesses don't want to share private information, municipalities that need to be voted don't want to share whether they're failing or doing things right or wrong. So that's always the tension that we need to navigate with sustainability cases. How do we talk about something that might be bad? How do we talk about something that might be good?
Great. Violetta, I think this other question is for you. Um, is somebody's asking, is a historical case about strategic decision related to development of a long-term sustainability oriented solution from the 1980s will be relevant to this competition? I hope I understood that question correctly.
So can we write a
Historical case.
historical case based in 1980s, and would it be relevant? I would answer back and saying, well, first off is, can you get that case under 8 pages? Second off would be, how are we going to apply the impact 5 principles within our teaching within our classroom? And then last but not least, it's been done in the past, and I know that there are very few cases out there. I know Harvard has a few, but they are not necessarily successful in terms of classroom discussions. It really will depend on how the information is presented, how the case is going to be told, how are you implementing the frameworks into the classroom. So it's a tough one to say yes or no, but just making sure that you're thinking through the criteria and what are your learning objectives?
Good point.
Let me just suggest a obfuscation strategy that might be useful to get this case through. I think it is very important that you, in the case, focus on a contemporary decision that has high level of similarity with that decision that was made in the 80s, and you frame the case around the most recent decision that needs to be made, but then you provide a lot of description and insights from the decision that was made in the 80s and try to write the case in such a way that in the discussion, so in the teaching note and in discussion, you can draw parallels with that historical decision and what happened before and after it. Because I think it is important that we don't continue to reinvent the wheel, and history has a lot to teach, and unfortunately not much of an audience to teach to, because we are interested in the last, what happened yesterday, although it's very similar to what happened 30 years ago. So that's my suggestion: camouflage. Like, talk about that decision and try to frame the case around a recent decision or an ongoing decision or debate that can learn from how that decision in the past was made, positively or negatively.
Meredith, we have a question for you. I think it's regarding prime events. I can't find it. I don't know if you have it so you can read it.
Oh, yes, about specific resources or opportunities for junior faculty. Yep. So what we have been doing is threefold. So I love that question. Thank you, whomever asked it. So we have workshops that you can come along to bi-monthly. So there would still be some left for this year, so that you can learn about the I-5, take a workshop. It's usually between a half hour and 2.5 hours, depending on which one you sign up for. So that's a way to kind of onboard yourself to how the I-5 is being discussed by the Prime community. The second opportunity runs on an annual basis, so we'll start accepting applications for it in the next month. But that's with Oikos International, the student group, and we have an early career researchers and late stage students professional development program that does build on resources and community of practice building, so that could feed into this quite easily. And then the third opportunity, which is a bit more tailored to this, but kind of on a different time frame, is that the Case Center will be doing case writing workshops and case teaching workshops in 2026, virtually and at the Prime Global Forum. So I think that'll pair well to get us all skilled up and ready to go if there is anyone in your network who's not on this call, but is eager and interested to carry forward with cases.
Great, thank you. Great resources there. We have a question here about publishing, Violetta, so that will be for you. What would you suggest, writing a case and finding the right publisher, or finding a publisher and write a case that will go with them?
Write a case and then find the right publisher. Keep in mind that many of the case publishers have very similar criteria. And I would say write a case, because if it's an engaging story and you want to bring it into your classroom, you don't need to publish it. Of course, that's, it'd be nice for it in terms of impact, but it's the story that you want to bring to the classroom. So it's simple. Write a case for yourself and then think about publishing.
Great. Yuri, this one will be for you. Oh, I lost the question. It's about social. Oh God, 1 second. Well, let's just go with this one. Can a case be written about a current challenging and ongoing real case that has already made remarkable and interesting outcomes, that has already had outcomes? And the second question is, can we hide the real name of the company? Yes, the company can be disguised. But go ahead, Yuri, if you have comments on that.
Yeah, maybe I'll let Violette. That the second part of the question is also interesting to me. I don't know the answer, so Violette. But because I usually think that Ivey cases are successful because we ground the case in a specific company, and so we want to know the names because it helps with building also a personal connection with the context, and then put ourselves in the shoes of the company. But there is a distinction that I think is useful when we write papers to publish, and is similar when we write cases. There is context, and there is content. Context is about the company, the decision that they made, whether it created positive or negative implications at different scales. Maybe we might know that for now it has created positive implication in a specific geographical area, but what about other geographical areas? What about in the future? So the context is the case that we write, and the content is the teaching note. So what are we learning out of that context? So you can write about something that has already happened, for which we already know that some consequences have materialized, but the students would not know how you are approaching that case. Like, what are you teaching through that case? Are you teaching about new forms of financing? Are you teaching about a cognitive bias that the company had and we all share? But it's not revealed through the case. The case is big with that bias in, but it's how you reveal that bias and you learn about it and how to overcome it come through the discussion and through how you set up your teaching note and teaching plan. So my point is that you can use whatever case is out there, even if it's already being concluded in a way, but the originality is in what are you using that case for? Like, what are you teaching through that case? Is to maybe learn about, there are cases about farms and farming. There are many. And I'm writing a case about a farm that has decided to invest in a robot that should make the farm more sustainable. No one would expect that I actually use that case to teach about ecology and natural cycles and how the introduction of that robot intersect with the natural cycles that the farm leverages in order to create sustainable food. So my point is there's context and content. The context can already be out there, already partially concluded, but the originality is what are you using that for? And that is on you.
And I'll add very quickly to that, Laura. I completely agree with Yuri. And thinking about to the decision point and that trigger, what's that action trigger? So thinking about the decision line and when do you actually stop and add everything that's in the case? Because that decision may have not already been made in your case. And so the rest goes into the teaching note. So thinking about that action trigger and what are you exactly talking about? And so often we have students that will pick up a Starbucks case and think that they know everything about it, that they're ready and prepped for the classroom. But the analysis, as Yuri had mentioned, is completely different. It's coming in from a different perspective. In terms of real names and companies and disguises. So for published source cases, we do not allow any fictitious characters in it or disguised names for the pure reason that it is based on published sources. For cases in regards to field-based, so if you've got a company that's giving you consent to sign, we see it sometimes here and there. We try to avoid any type of disguise, but if required by the company, it usually starts with a naming convention. And if it is, we ask that they keep the protagonist and the gender and the race, so on and so forth, age, consistent with who the individual was if required. And disguise can come from names, it could come from finance, so any financials. Some companies are private and do not want to publicize that yet for obvious reasons. So simply, multiplying by 1.3 or dividing by 0.7 to disguise some of the financials, making sure we're staying consistent when saying that a $10 million company is not a $100 million company.
Well, that's all the time we have this morning. Thank you so much, Meredith. Thank you, Violetta. And thank you, Yuri, for joining us. You shared all the knowledge that we expected and more. So thank you. And to everybody that asked questions and didn't get an answer, don't worry, we're going to send an email. We're going to send all the resources that Meredith shared, and we're going to answer as many questions as we can in writing. So thank you so much. Just a few notes before we go. Remember that the submissions open for the case writing competition on January 6, 2025. And they will be open for close to 2 months, closing on February 28th. So you have plenty of time to submit your case. We're very, very excited to evaluate your submissions. And for more information, go to the Ivey Publishing website for every single detail you need about submissions, about what the award is about, the prices, and everything else that you can think of. Also, if you need a little bit of reinforcement in terms of case writing, I suggest that you review our workshops page where we have our upcoming case writing workshop and more resources for you to hone those skills and get to the level that you want to get to in terms of case writing. And that's it for today. Thank you so much. My name is Laura Woodman, and we are thrilled that we were able to spend this time with you. Have a great rest of your day and see you next time.
Thanks, everyone.
Ciao.
Thank you. Bye-bye.